Kia ora, Ferg. How are you today?
Kia ora, Esther. Nice to see you. Nice to be talking again. Can I just say, after 30 odd years in radio and interviewing lots of people and asking trillions of questions, it's nice to be on the other end this time.
Well, now is your moment. Maybe we need to do another one afterwards where you can talk for longer than 20 minutes.
No, I think that'll stretch me enough.
Also, you're not used to being video, so just remember you've got a camera on you. No, touching of the nose or anything. So tell us, for all of those watching, how many terms have you been on council?
4. Can you believe? Wow. But
12 years.
Yes, 12 years. Yeah, but and 4 completely different terms, when I stop and think and look back, man, they've been 4 very, very different terms for various reasons.
Yeah, maybe we'll delve into that a little bit. So firstly, where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from the mighty Arthur's Point.
The mighty Arthur's Point, and you're at home, are you?
Yes, I'm home. It's a bit of a grey old day. The fire's going, and we're having a cruisy day, but looking forward to the chat with you.
Awesome. So you've obviously decided to stand again for your 5th term. Can you just tell us what made you decide to run again?
I think for me, probably a little bit about what I just mentioned to you, and looking back and seeing that I've been a part of 4 very different terms with a couple of different leaders. The first term, to try and cut it short for you, is finding your way as a councillor under Vanessa Van Uden, figuring out how it works for you and for your family as well, which is important. And then the second term was Jim Bolt's first term, and he wanted to get some things done. We had a council that was very much on the page together. I thought that the council of that time was a lot of people who were of the same ilk, real strong community people. Tony Hill, the late John McDonald, Penny Clark, Val Miller, Ross McRoby, and Callum McLeod from across the ditch. So we got going and did what we did in that term. And then I thought 2 would be enough. That was my goal. If I got 2, I'd be extremely fortunate. But we had a lot of councillors moving who didn't stand after that term. So a bit of pressure was brought to bear as to what I was doing to try and create some sort of continuity. So I stood again, and the people were in favour. So we went into what became our COVID years. So yes. Coming out of that was, there was work to be done to clean up and get ahead or do what we needed to do after the COVID years. And then the last term, which is the one that you've been a part of as well, is, we started out with the leaky homes, and then we had, one thing after the other with the poo ponds, with arterials, with local water done well, with intensification. But most importantly, though, the desire still remains. I've spent 38 years in this community, and it's always been about the community right from day one when we were bringing up our young girls, to supporting them and then having the opportunity in local government, and then still believing that I have value around the table. But if that doesn't happen this time around, then that's democracy, and I can live with that. You
can handle that, can you?
Yeah.
Well, look, you've got a strong backing in this community. Maybe that brings us to the different wards, because you've stood in different wards. So this time round, you're standing in the Whakatipu ward. Can you just tell us what made you kind of shift to changing to a different ward?
It doesn't make any difference to me. My wife mentioned to me when we decided that I would like to go back in for another go, was let's just wait and see who's standing where, to try and get the best people in if possible, if that's how you see it. You're a councillor for the district, Esther, and that's how I've always operated. Nothing, as I've said to the people in Arrowtown and Arthur's Point, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, is that nothing would change. I'm still a councillor for the district. I'll still be involved with all the community associations as best I can. I'll be out there, I'll be seen, I can help, I'll be accessible and visible. But I think for me, it's about giving the community the opportunity to get the best people in.
Okay. So you're you're pretty seasoned. So this kororo, the kororo that I've had with everyone is, it's the same kind of base of questions, but obviously people bring different experience. So let's talk a little bit about that experience that you've touched on. So have you found any particular terms more challenging than others? Is probably the first question.
Yeah, there's always learnings, and that's one thing I've endeavoured to take from term to term as I've been fortunate enough to be a part of council. Gosh, it's such a tough question, really, in lots of ways, because there's so much that's coming at you.
Yeah, it's not just who's around the table, it's what's changing in legislation, it's how many people live in the community, what tourism looks like, whether we've got some major impacts like COVID. There's lots of different things. I mean,
that's right.
Is there anything that you just kind of you want to say about where we're at now as a community based on your experience around the table for so long?
I think the thing that I've focused on a little bit and thought a lot about over the last term is that some things, maybe not some things, lessons need to be learned. And, if I'm fortunate enough to go back in, then I'll become a very senior councillor. and I'll have to lead more, I feel, with whoever else, if whoever that mix is. I might not be part of that mix. But if I'm there, I think some things have to change a little bit, It's always hard to get change, and I think you've seen that front on, Esther, in your time. I know that you've tried to get change, and it's been hard to get. I often think about, can you get change? I think it's more about, I don't know whether change is the right word. It's about your contribution. But I think we've got to learn lessons from this last 3 years, and depending on who goes through, if some of us who have been there this last term are fortunate enough to go in, is that, at least we've been through this, and that's what we've got to understand, is that we've lived through this last 3 years, and this is where we've battled, and this is where we've struggled, and this is where we need to do better.
Okay, so where do you think we do need to do better?
Well, the drum that I've been beating a lot around communication, and I guess I look at that and go, we somehow we've got to bring sections of the community closer to the organisation. It's not easy to do, as you've found out, but I think we've got to be a bit more of an outward-looking organisation. We've got to look outwards more than look inwards. We've got to take people, residents, communities, endeavour to take them with us on those issues that are tough and hard to churn through.
Okay. Yeah, and of course in this kororo we've heard that a lot from candidates, whether they be incumbents or not. And it's the rhetoric that, myself and others, so I've been on for 1.5 terms because I came in a by-election. Same rhetoric, and it hasn't yet happened, but I think the message has got through. So I think as an organisation we finally know that we hope that it's at its rock bottom and that it can only get better. But what we do from here on in is absolutely crucial, which, you've been obviously privy to that conversation around how are we actually going to do this then? And what does that look like?
If I can just interject, Esther, and just, looking ahead, regardless of who goes in, there is going to be change within the organisation, and that's around the CE, and that might throw up an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, and that's with all due respect to the CE.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is around kind of big politics, like if we think global politics and worldview and the big picture of stuff. So I think each person that comes to the table obviously brings their own worldview, right? We all do. So what do you think, or how might you describe your worldview? So, for example, my worldview is I take a lens that ecology is the foundation of everything, and our economy only exists when we have a healthy ecology. And I guess my political views are kind of based on similar aspects of that. So that's a big question, I know, but are there any kind of aspects or worldview that you kind of feel that you bring to the table?
I don't know whether I looked that wide, Esther, in terms of a worldview. I in previous years, and even this, leading up to this election, people have asked me about running for the mayoralty, and that's something that I addressed briefly with my family. It didn't take long to say no, and that's because you got to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and that's my strength. I think is I'm a people's person, and I want to be seen. I want to be visible. I want to be out there. I want to be doing what I can to the best of my ability for the people. So for me, it's that listening. Yes, I understand how the world is ticking at the moment and how our region is ticking in the stresses that we're going through at the moment. But I don't know in the way that I conduct myself as a councillor whether the worldview actually comes into it for me, because our world, as I see it, is QLDC, and the role that we have been trusted with if we're successful in trying to do the best job that we can. So I don't know whether I've really answered your question in lots of ways.
No, that's okay.
I think if I could just back up that by saying that by answering the question the way that I have, I acknowledge people and councillors like yourself and others who bring what they bring with a worldview or the way that they function as a councillor. So that's why I listen a lot, because I learn a lot from the likes of you and how you approach the role and what you bring to the table. The same as with young Cody Tucker from Hawea and Lyle Cox, another senior councillor, and Nikki with her pluses. They're the people that educate me about some of the thinkings that are out there that goes into my equation of thinking and process.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's hard to phrase that, but I think like we each have certain ideologies, either consciously or subconsciously, that we kind of lean towards, and they kind of will affect our decision making, I suppose. Can you think of a time, if we think about decision making, can you think of a time where and you don't have to give an example. Nobody's yet been able to give an example because it's quite hard. But maybe just the process. But, like you come to the table and you've got an idea of something based on what the community is telling you, what submissions and hearings tell us. Do you find that you have to change your view on things based on new information? Can you tell us a little bit about like the deliberative process and what that looks like for you?
It's a good question. I think one I can think of quite vividly is just recently with local water done well. I think most of us were all over the place around where we stood on that one after community feedback. And you got to listen, because I'm a listener. I listened to a lot of the voices around the table on that day leading into the decision of where I was going to go with that vote. And I think I made the comment of that I'm going to have to make up my mind quick, because hands were going up very shortly. So for me, you got to have your gut feeling. You got to be talking to people. You got to do your reading, and you should know with your experience. And I've certainly learned that, to know where to go with your reading, and then make up your mind. I like to listen to the CEO. At times around the table, because it's his job, whether we like it or not, to give us the good news and the bad news. So it helps with decision making, and then you make your call. I mean, right up to that last minute with local water done well, and it was a casting vote by the mayor, I went the other way. But that's the will of council. Win or lose, that's the will of council. Move on. Your mind changes. It can change pretty quick sometimes. Something you don't cover everything that you want to cover, I don't feel. Hence the ability of listening to other people around the table who might have covered off an area that you haven't got to, that influences your decision making. I mean, the pressure goes on, Esther. I don't know how you feel around the table, but for me,
I mean, I think the deliberative process is a real skill, and it's a skill which takes practice to learn it. And you actually never know really whether you're making the right decision or not. You can only base it on the information you have. And I think the thing that I find challenging as well is the intergenerational aspect of it. So you've got information that's here and now, but you're actually predicting out to the future and going, what impact will this have in the future? And very often you don't know the answers. So you can only base it on all the prior knowledge that you have, and perhaps other, and that's why I bring up worldview, perhaps what's happened elsewhere when similar policies have been created, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a really privileged work, isn't it? And
yeah, absolutely
hard. But I think, you know, in these discussions, one of the things that has come up is obviously the casting vote, and if you get in again, then that's going to be something which may well be discussed again. And I pitched obviously in that last meeting that we change our standing orders around the casting vote. For me, I realise that it's quite often harder to kind of put something on the table or to think it through even more when maybe you don't have new information. But what concerns me is that we do require consensus building when we've got this very split kind of 50-50 vote that seems to, it hasn't occurred that often, but it's occurred often enough on some big issues. So, you know, that's something which I think it's become more transparent. So one of the things that I feel that's happened this term, and be interested in your thoughts, is that there's a lot of complaints about lack of transparency, and rightly so, but actually we're more transparent now than, as an organisation, that organisation is more transparent than it's ever been.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, and but it's still got work to do. You know, picking up on your point just a few moments ago, you know, I think I've made the comment before that as councillors, more often than not, we have to think or imagine about things we don't know about yet.
Yeah.
As we're looking ahead, you know, and as you say, is it a skill? Well, I guess it is, but we still have to make a call on that, you know. It's yeah. It can be a hard one, and the hardest thing for me around the table, Esther, is actually getting in to have my say. You know, my heart beats boom, boom, boom. People say to me when I first got in, "Oh, you'll have no trouble speaking because you speak for a living." You know, well, that the speak around the council table is way different than standing at Gibson Valley in front of 20,000 and talking to people. I've got to be set to go. If I'm going to say something, it's got to be in front of me. I've got to be set to go. I'll keep it short because I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, you know. So the council experience for me is way different to what I've experienced as a broadcaster.
And also, yeah, I've just had this corridor with another incumbent. You know, it's very different to perhaps other boards as well. Like the level of scrutiny makes you behave differently. And we were just talking about, we want to bring our authentic selves, like we want to be authentic and genuine, but you also need to be so prepared, and you're also kind of overthinking everything, you know, because you're constantly trying to look at it from every angle, from every aspect, thinking about how it could be recontextualized if it was reported in a certain way. Like, so you're kind of hyper aware around that table, hey, and if you're not, then maybe you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I'll go back to it again. You know, I've learned so much just by listening. I'll leave that one there.
Yeah, great stuff. So what role do you think ego plays in politics, and do you have an ego?
Jeez, I don't think I've got an ego. I think I learned pretty early on that ego's not a thing to have around a council table or as a councillor, and I think, you know, for those that want to run for the mayoralty, and over the years, you know, for those that decide they're going to have a crack before they've even got onto council, I think that shows a little bit of ego, in my opinion. But there's no room for ego. No room for ego. I think people who know me well enough, being a people's person who enjoys inclusivity and collaborating with everybody, getting on with everybody, get the job done. There's no ego with me. I might have had it on the football field, rugby field years ago, but it's been beaten out of me.
Well, I would like to just, I guess, give you a big up, which is that you do facilitate and chair very well, which I think is important for a chair to be able to facilitate and be inclusive. So yeah, well done on that front for sure.
Thank you.
So we're possibly kind of coming towards the end of the conversation, but I guess, what parting kind of thoughts or wisdom do you want your community to know about, because they know you, so part of it's just going to be name recognition, but are there some thoughts that you want to kind of share? Because in candidate debates, the you behind the politics is often lost. People want to know, well, how are you going to deal with rates, and how are you going to deal with, and that's why we're there. But how you get to that decision making, I think, is what this particular podcast is about. It's about not just the promises, it's about how you get there with all the information. So yeah, is there kind of any aspects that you want the community to know?
Yeah, I've always pushed back when people say that, and I understand name recognition is a big part of it. When I first was standing, people said to me, you'll make it because everyone knows who you are. But I pushed back on that by saying, well, I'd like to think, because prior to standing for the very first time, I was heavily involved in the community with our two girls who are now adults, and their upbringing and their organisations and groups that they were a part of. I worked in a very strong community radio station, Q92 FM, which is not about these days, but there was a work ethic about the station that the success was all about, and that was being out in the community. And if there was something on, Chaz Strader, the late Chaz Strader, our boss, said, you got to be there, whether it was me or Andrew or Grant, whoever it was back in the day, we had to be there. So when I stood for council for the first time, I said to myself, well, okay, if this is the next level for me, then I think I've done a pretty good apprenticeship within the community. And I've always said to people that I would like to think that my work in the community would far outweigh what's known about me as a broadcaster. And I'd like to think that getting the votes over the terms has been about the work that I do as a councillor, which is a councillor for the district. Be seen, being accessible, get out and meet the people, build your relationships with staff to help people in a way that might be able to help people get a result, whether it's a positive or a negative. Get over to Wanaka on a regular basis. Go to the meetings. I was at Hawea Flat the other week for the opening of their Littlewee playground, community playground. Be seen. Show that you care. And that's always been me. Have empathy with the community. That skyline deluge that took out part of our cemetery had a huge effect on. It might have only been a small group of people, but the effect on those people was quite profound, and it touched me. And I had some pretty emotional conversations with people who were affected by that. I had some pretty emotional conversations with people who were affected by the arterial route works, property owners and hospitality owners, who I went along, took Gavin Bartlett with me, Councillor Bartlett, one time, and we paid a visit. They were in tears about what was happening to them and their business, and they just couldn't see a way out. You've got to show community empathy when it's needed and required, because we're part of that community as well. So nothing would change for me, Esther, around that. I'm a people's person. I care, and there's more work to be done. We've got to learn lessons, and I think I'm in a position.
Well, I'm glad you brought it back to that, because that did actually go full circle. So we started the conversation at the beginning with talking about lessons learned, and when I hear you saying, and I agree that you go out and you meet community members and you make a huge effort to do that, and thank you for that work, and you listen. But I think what's hard is we're accountable for those decisions, and those people, for example, on the arterial, who felt the pain, had their commercial operations completely damaged for a significant length of time, and a whole host of other issues. At the end of the day, they still see the spend that we signed off on. They still see, so the lessons learned is absolutely where our council needs to go. And it's not the point in the conversation where we're going to go down that rabbit hole, but I think what our community should know is that there's been strong advocacy from us in terms of doing that better. And we know that with the changes that are coming, that I think there is opportunity for for those to actually be set in policy and concrete, because we actually understand where the failings are. So, you know,
Yeah, no.
I guess it's a hopeful point at which to end on, rather than it kind of sounds like a low point, but there have been a lot of lessons learned, and I don't think our community's actually seen the outcomes of those lessons learned yet, and that's why they're so frustrated.
Yeah, and I think the other point for me, and just bringing this to a close for you, Esther, is that town's changing and it will continue to change. There are a lot of new people here, but also there are a lot of older people here that have been here for a long period of time, and that's been part of the reason why I've been encouraged to stand again, is I bring that experience and knowledge and of history and heritage, of things that were done a while ago that still need to be part of conversations as we move ahead and other councils move ahead, and should never be forgotten about. So I represent a bit of that as well as liking to think that I'm forward thinking enough for those that are recent arrivals.
Yeah, and I think those legacy issues, you haven't forgotten them, and you have been part of that, so you understand what those stakeholders who engaged 10 years ago still actually want, and how that repositions, I guess, as we move forward. So yeah, great to hear that. Well, listen, thank you so much for standing again, and thanks for your time today, and yeah, best wishes for your campaign.
Thank you, Esther. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the support and the help and the kind words. Take care.
Thanks.